Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Decline Invite, the only invite worth accepting. I'm your host, the extroverted IT leader, Ryan Drumheller, and today's episode is going to be a really interesting conversation because we're going to dive directly into what it actually looks like to build products, teams, businesses in a world rapidly becoming AI native. And joining me today is Raj Singh. Raj is the VP of New Products at Mozilla and a repeat founder with 4 successful exits across startups in AI, productivity, browsers, mobile, live video, and consumer platforms. He joined Mozilla through an acquisition of his own AI meeting summarization startup, Pulse, previously built Tempo AI, which was acquired by Salesforce. It's a mouthful, a lot of great companies there, and has spent years operating at the intersection of startups, growth, product strategy, AI, and execution. One thing that I've really appreciated about Raj's perspective is that he cuts through a lot of the surface level AI hype, and he talks very openly about things like disruption becoming the new moat, the rise of AI native builders, super ICs, signal versus noise in AI, and how product growth and execution are fundamentally changing in real time. So, with all of that, Raj, I'd like to welcome you to Decline Invite. It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the first things we love to do is just jump into a couple icebreakers before we go and unpack everything that we just went through here at the introduction. So, one of the first questions I had was entrepreneurship always a direction for you, or did that just kind of evolve naturally over time?
I think if you, it's an icebreaker, but it's also a type of question that probably could get a 60-minute response or a 60-second response. I think if you talk to a lot of founders about their origin stories and what kind of got them there into, or just whether successful or not, but like what just made them take that sort of next step, it's often because of a chip on their shoulder or needing to prove something to themselves or a lack of opportunity or kind of being forced into a position. For me, it was very much a situation. I was in college, and I'm seeing, I was in college during the dot-com boom, and seeing successful founders out of my former high school. And I was like, hey, you know what? I could do that too, right? And I was never like the smartest kid in the class. I was probably in the top 80%, but not in the top 20%, but not in the, not in the top 2%. And so there was a little bit of that chip. And so it kind of fell into it and then never really looked back.
I actually love that because a lot of what you just described is maybe something I'm going through myself to a certain degree. So I loved hearing that. And if you ever looked at my transcript from high school, it's two different people. It's not it's not the same kid. So I understand everything you just said. So I mean, you built multiple industries. We described a little bit in the intro, but from browsers to AI to productivity tools, what keeps pulling you towards building?
Um, you know, uh, I think I probably as a I hate the term repeat founder. I mean, I think today everyone's a builder, but as somebody who's pursued this sort of path of pain, for lack of a better term, I've always been motivated by personal pain points and personal problems. That's both a blessing and a curse. A lot of PM doctrine or dogma would basically say, don't build it for yourself as a single user. Solve a problem for somebody else. Um, uh, Contrary to that, I've almost entirely only focused on things where I'm solving a personal pain point. So I have a knack for kind of going about my day and like seeing a problem and like, you know what, that's kind of annoying. Can I improve that? Interestingly, a very valuable knack to have today in an AI world, which is very much becoming dominated with systems thinking. And then I pursue it. And where I said blessing and a curse, what I meant to what I sort of implied is, as a result, all my personal pain points are often very consumer-esque. And you can imagine consumer, it's just harder, right? From a growth perspective, revenue monetization perspective, whatnot. Certainly, I have friends in my network who've effectively built the same business 3 times over in a B2B capacity, with 3 phenomenal exits. And I often joke that I can't get past first base because I focus on consumer, but it's okay because in consumer, you only get first bases or you get home runs.
That is a very interesting strategy, and I kind of have been hinted at that a few times, I think, over the last month or so. Like, yeah, find a problem, solve it. So I mean, it makes sense to me, get out of your own kind of way. And if you're solving things for other people, I mean, those are life lessons that I teach in, any teams that I'm, managing at that point. I try to get, my team to go out there and find those problems and see if they become helpers, especially from a technical capacity. I mean, normally those individuals are coming to you, because their days aren't going well or something broke or, whatever it is. And if you can flip the narrative, it becomes such a difference maker. And you can flip that narrative with enough individuals, well, you're going to hit a home run and not a first base hit, right? So, what energizes you the most today? Is it the building itself, the growth side, the product side, just solving the problem?
I think tech has always been unique in that you have to be constantly reinventing yourself. Things are changing so fast. Um, Probably today more so than ever before. I mean, just the pace of innovation, the pace of change and workflow change and whatnot. And I've always enjoyed, I'm a very curious person. I've enjoyed like the constant learning, constant tinkering, constant hacking. And so that really attracts me to early stage and new products. Certainly as, and I describe these as sort of archetypes, but certainly as a product or an organization grows, the needs grow and the sort of competencies or skills that come with that change. Um, Whether that's about more operational work, dealing with politics, organizational design, and those things are great too. Don't get me wrong, and I've done a lot of that. But I think what often steers me towards early stage is the opportunity to sort of just curiously learn and build from scratch and hack away and sort of figure it out. And I think that builder mindset is a great place to be in 2026 right now, because this is sort of the way things are moving as we're seeing flattening of organizational structures, and a lot of managers really just sort of becoming player coaches, where they're equally participating as well as coaching, which is a very different way of thinking about roles and how organizations have been traditionally designed.
Absolutely love that. I mean, the one thing, somebody always asks me a question of like, what's the one thing that you appreciate about like AI right now or the landscape of tech? And it's that I feel more creative than I've ever been, or the possibility of being able to. I always go back to not being able to draw as a child, especially a kid with ADHD. It was like such a nightmare to like be able to lose myself. And if I felt like I could have draw, like if I can draw anything, then I would have probably been better. And now I feel like with AI, it's almost like my ability to draw, and I do find myself building tools. I never was on the side of like product development, and I'm finding myself drawn to that more and more as I hear these stories, and it kind of getting away from, maybe the more traditional like CIO path and the internal IT and getting over to a CTO side of things where you're being creative and drawing this, so to speak. So I really appreciate that perspective. Honestly, it's such a great time for that side.
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, I like to say AI is making execution a lot cheaper. And so a lot of the energy is now really around judgment, taste, creativity, um, knowing what to build, um, you know, all the other sort of aspects. Because the actual build itself is now, I wouldn't say commoditized, but certainly a lot easier and a lot cheaper to do than it was just 2 years ago.
yeah, and that's such a valid path. I mean, you've got individuals that you could argue, the quality of maybe the build, but I mean, the creativity, the idea going into it at least gets you to a certain point, and then maybe, a veteran or somebody who really knows coding, saddled with an AI, can, take it home. But you're getting, like to your point, execution is coming so much faster. The ability to get there is coming so much faster, and products are rolling out at rapid rates now. It's an incredible time for that side of the fence, and it's enlightening for somebody that has heard a lot about the AI horror stories to talk about some of the good things, some of the good wins that AI can produce. So you've had a unique perspective of building some startups from zero and now operating this like a much larger environment at Mozilla. What did building and exiting startups teach you that, no book or no advice or anything like that could have taught you?
I think when you build something, I mean, maybe for some, particularly your first startup, your goal might be, I just want to get an exit. I understand you're trying to make some money, but that's not the end game. Like, ultimately, you're building something because you want to make an impact. Like, you really believe in it. It inspires you. You have some deep passion. You want to see as many people using it. For me, it's always about happy users. I remember being on an airplane wearing a T-shirt of something I built, and somebody's like, "Hey, I use that." I'm like, "Yeah, it's an amazing feeling, right?" So, um, I think, uh, in some ways, first space exits, not the outcome I necessarily want. Now, that being said, um, I think, particularly when it comes to consumer, um, that's often the outcome. And it's hard because consumer, I like to say it's winner take all. 80, somebody's going to get 85% of the market. Number two might get 10%, and then everyone else is battling for the last five. Very different enterprise where it's like rule of thirds, and they need optionality and whatnot. So I guess going through multiple startups has certainly taught me the importance of grit. The first 10 hires, obviously, super important and very different now in an agent first world, or AI enabled world, probably a better way to frame it. And But it hasn't changed how I approach things. I still think about a pain point. I still think about what I think an elegant experience might look like. Um, Often I get the question like, "Hey, Raj, because you've built and had success in the past, does that improve the odds of you having success again?" And I don't know. It's a funny question. I mean, investors will often invest in repeat founders, less so because they necessarily had success before, but more so because they know they're legit and won't run away. And part of the reason is so many people give up. If you're not deeply passionate about the problem, by year two or three, it's really hard to fake it. It's hard. You're going multiple years with very little income. It's tough. It's not a desirable lifestyle. So I think, I like to believe that what I've learned in the past has almost little impact on my chance of success again. So like particularly from a growth perspective, like things that worked in the past don't work today. You have to constantly figure it out. But I also like to believe that I have good intuition and I'm a naturally sort of generally creative person, and so I'll think about and sort of hack and figure it out. But um, in the end, I've had as many failures as I've had success, and it only takes one really. I had an old board member that once said, "You only get rich once." So an interesting way of framing it.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question to get asked, though. And I think it makes sense to ask, right? You've had success. What are the chances? Is it higher than, say now I'm going to make this transition on my side and I'm going to go make something, right? Like we have the same chances. Like I would think, no, you would probably would, have a higher percentage to do that because you've had, the wins, you've also had the losses behind you. And I'm a person who truly believes that you learn from your losses, and that helps propel the chances of getting a win. But it's a great question, and it's interesting, perspective that you have that. And yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a great thought on there, and I appreciate the humbleness behind it. But I mean, I don't have any percentages to throw out there. But if I'm a betting man, I'm gonna take you over me, in that situation at the end of the day. So, with that, what changes mentally, when you go from, the start of chaos and now you find yourself at like a larger organization at this point, what kind of mental changes do you go through with that lifestyle versus this lifestyle now?
Well, when you're doing a startup, the startup is your brand, and so in many ways, the success or failure of the startup completely reflects on you. And I had another board member say this once, and it really hit home. When things are successful, everyone takes credit. When things are failing, they blame the CEO, they blame the founder, right? And so that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. Certainly within a larger organization, you're in a rocket ship. You could be totally failing, but the rocket is still taking off, right? And so it's a very different way from a stress perspective or stress level. It's just a very different experience from that perspective. I think the other thing is when you're in a startup, you attract a different archetype of people. often you attract folks who, particularly early stage, that maybe um, couldn't get into the best and greatest large companies for whatever reason. They're quirky in their own ways, or maybe they're super like amazing on A, B, and C, and like really suck on D, E, F, and and that doesn't work in a larger company, but it can totally work in a startup if you can accommodate or adapt, right? So the fact that you get these sort of different types of archetypes, these needles in a haystack, it's a very different vibe. You have a team, almost misfits. I wouldn't describe them as misfits, but um, motivated by a particular mission that, and in some instances, just to be clear, you might get that person who's opted to decline some very significant salary because they really believe in what you're doing. But you have this team, and you're out there, and you're, motivated towards a singular mission. You're in a larger company, it attracts a very different archetype. People are looking for something stable. They don't want radical change necessarily all the time. You can't just suddenly turn right and turn left. You have to socialize and get people on board. You have politics. You have other people involved, right? And so that's a very different perspective from a management perspective, and how you manage that, and how you over communicate, and how you empathize, and how you deal with the politics, and protect your group, and protect people, and think about their careers and their families and whatnot. You're doing those things in a startup too, but it's just a very different sort of lens. I think the other thing, when I think about the individual roles themselves, there are archetypes. You think about startup kind of people, they're working on 0 to 1 building. 0 to 1 is very liberating. You can effectively, creativity is your canvas. You can build whatever you want. You can make decisions in the same day. You don't need to get approvals. You don't necessarily have to worry so much about like, am I 99% or 100% secure? I'm 99% is good enough because I don't have that many production users. You don't have to worry about, you know, would this change break a bunch of things? Well, the revenue impact was only like $10, so who cares, right? Like, so you've got like a lot of things you can do that give you a lot of advantages in terms of speed, even from a legal perspective, right? You're in a larger company now. You're working on a mature product. I like to describe this as much more of an operator archetype versus a visionary or craftsperson, someone in the early stage. And so it's a very different set of guardrails. Little changes you make could have multiple millions of dollars in revenue impact. Every change has to be discussed and socialized and put, depending on the organization, maybe even consensus acquired across 30, 40, 50 different people, depending on the size of the product and stage and whatnot. So, it's a very different kind of game. It's a very different kind of work. It's a lot of meetings, right? And so I think the archetypes, the roles are fundamentally different. The day-to-day work is fundamentally different. The archetypes they attract are fundamentally different. So it is a marked change. Now, given all of that, I do think in this AI first world, it's been incredible watching how both sides are sort of adapting. And I don't really mean to say sides as they're like, opposing forces. It's just, different sort of types of work that you do. And the builders are now, let's say the early stage, they now feel like they can move faster than they ever could before, right? And now they have access to a lot of the things, they're generally more generalist or breadth level type work. Now they can create automations all over the place, right? And when you think about folks within larger companies, they tend to be more specialists. And so now for the first time, they're getting exposure into different things. So it's really interesting watching how this is evolving and playing out in different organizations.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a lot of great points there, and to co-echo that, most of the time when I'm dealing with an organization right now, it's essentially the adoption. Like, are you guys ready to pivot? Are you guys ready to change how you've always done business? Because it's going to be a change. As soon as you're adopting AI and you're unleashing it, you can't move at a snail's pace anymore because it's going to force you to have to make quicker decisions at that point. So it is, yeah, it really is interesting to hear that and everything you echoed. Yeah, I mean, two different lifestyles, right? And probably two different mindsets. Some people like one over the other, and that's totally okay. But to be able to cross the bridges and be able to have both that experience on each side of the fences, and from your perspective, some of that's kind of coming together. It's a fascinating time in tech right now. I'm really interested to see where it goes from here.
I
Uh,
think Yeah, I think right now for most larger startups are definitely way past this, but for most larger organizations, I think a lot of the work right now is around AI adoption. And Different organizations have taken different approaches. Founder-led large companies can take a more Socratic or a higher, like they can kind of demand it. You'll see some of that token maxing, Facebook, whatnot, right? But most organizations are not really founder led, and so it's much more organic in terms of their adoption curve. And I think a lot of organizations are saying, okay, how do we create systems in place to encourage more adoption, to encourage trying of more tools? How do we remove roadblocks around security reviews of apps, testing things, playing with things, making sure they can access different systems, APIs are in place, MCPs, whatever, to just kind of drive more organic use? How do we create show and tells, things like that? And so that's what I'm sort of seeing. I do think um, it's probably going to continue along this track for the next, let's call it year or so, maybe 2 years. After which, I think the next step now is let's evaluate the ROI. And in parallel, have we built all the scaffolding around this? Because certainly there's security risk. Certainly there's questions around who should have access to what should people be able to do? Can they touch production systems? But it is a dramatic transformation of work. And I think it's deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people, including myself, just the anxiety and FOMO around the pace of things. But the fact that, in many instances, you might have a single workflow that's worked for you for 10 years, and now you have to revisit and change it. That's uncomfortable. And right now, I think you're seeing AI adoption, but you're not necessarily seeing um, companies get reorganized to be more AI native. And what I mean by that is, for example, um, I don't know if it was Shopify, but one of these organizations talking about, or maybe it was Snowflake, I forget, talking about one pizza teams and two pizza teams. Like historically, the two pizza rule, the sort of Amazon, 6 to 8 people was kind of ideal, optimal size. But now with AI, there might be specific features or internal tools or products where you just want a one-person team, and that person is full stack designer, builder, engineer. In other cases, you might want a two-person team. In other cases, you might want a more traditional two-pizza team, right? And so that sort of transition into what I would describe as more an AI native organization is quite different to sort of AI adoption. So I think right now we're still kind of in that first step. And just to be clear, there's like many steps within those steps, between sort of like just using ChatGPT vanilla and then obviously running a bunch of agents in an autonomous way with feedback loops and verification and whatnot. But that's kind of how I see this sort of digital transformation happening, or AI transformation. And uh, the fact that we're getting to live through this sort of curve is very interesting. But all of this is coming with tension as well, right? Because uh, um, you would have to be blind at this point to see that there are layoffs happening, and why are those happening, and how is this playing out? Certainly on everyone's mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that. I'm one of those hundreds of thousands or whatever the number is at this point. So I definitely understand that. And I have nothing to do with product, so it doesn't really matter. At this point, the biggest thing, you kind of hit the nail on the head on a little bit of this is you kind of have to experiment. I mean, we're very much in an experimental time, and we have a lot of individuals out there talking about what to do, what not to do, and I think that some of that is, case by case. Some of it is absolutely like, yeah, like we could have saw that come in, right? You should have not have done those things. But a lot of the things you're talking about right now, the experimentation side of things, of like, should we put one person to oversee this entire thing, or should we have a smaller team or larger? These are all kind of experimentation, style situations, and that's the real feedback I'm really interested to see and what happens, because that'll probably dictate the rest of my career. I mean, the rest of my working life at that point, likely to see kind of how that evolves, and that's fascinating to me. Not so much that the business is missed, like we can all talk about that all day long, but that side of it, I think, is a truly fascinating side with AI right now. And so with that piece and what you've been seeing, what do you think that the teams are actually getting right with the actual AI adoption, especially when you're coming to product, development and, trying to sort out some of these situations and decisions.
Yeah, I don't know if I would argue decisions are necessarily happening that much faster, but they are certainly coming into, I'd say, two buckets. One, we're coming into decisions with more data. So a lot of the data sciencey aspect with AI has allowed us to run queries and do analysis that would have taken much longer in the past. Could be competitive research, could be whatever it is, market research, could be simply just analyzing video session replay of the product or analyzing analytics, whatever. But so you're coming in with more data. And then two, um, I think it's exposing things that we didn't realize we need to decide. So I don't know how best to articulate that, but in some ways, now that we can actually look at edges of a product in ways that would have required a larger team or more resources in the past, it's uncovering things. And so we're like, oh, we never really looked here, but now we're, you know, looking here casually because we have AI and it's so cheap to look here. And like, there's something here we should dig into, right? And so I think, I think that's basically expanding the number of decisions sort of being made. So in the end, you're still applying some level of human taste or judgment to decide what's worth pursuing, digging in further, figuring out where to investigate, where to go next, what to fix, what to build, what to prioritize, what not. But it's interesting that there's another camp also emerging at this point, which is, you know, and this is in part because humans obviously are the slowest part of the loop, sort of playing on like Amdahl's law, which is like, you know, the slowest part of any system is the part that has to be sequenced. It can't run in parallel. Um, you know, there's another camp saying, hey, uh, what if you just let the system say, you know what, take your best guess and just go, and run it fully autonomously, and instead of optimizing on, let's say, quality of decision, optimize on speed. Historically, I would have said as a startup pre-AI era that speed consumes everything else. Like, you know, just being faster, moving faster is a very significant metric that's correlated to success for a startup. How fast they learn from mistakes, how fast they're willing to change and move forward, for sure. But I don't think those constructs were built in a time where you can work on infinity with no cost, you know, effectively like, you know, like limited resource need or demand. And so, you know, I'm not sure that's necessarily the right approach today or not, but it's interesting to see both of these experiments kind of running in parallel. And in the end, you know, it comes back to that more macro question: why do some products win and why do some products not, right? And is it if product A and product B both used AI, or one used AI, one didn't use AI? Is that just a correlation, or is that actually a causation? You know, and I think all of these things are very early, but I think the fact that so many people are experimenting at so many levels and so many layers, and all of this is sort of being, you know, Twitter has sort of become the largest build in public repo in the world. People are sharing, not necessarily for uh, the right intentions. Maybe they're just trying to make money or whatnot. But people are sharing at some level. If you parse between that and you parse between group chats and whatnot, it's a crazy time. I don't know what the best stack is today. I wouldn't be able to answer that today, but I do know the pace of innovation, experimentation, and change is real.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just ended with is one of the hardest questions I get asked is like, what does the future look like? Or the traditional, what's the next 5 years? I'm like, I can't tell you what the next year looks like. I have a guess of what I think, the next year looks like, but 5 years, I'm sorting through the data like anybody else at this point, just trying to get an idea of maybe, what's to come. And, like you said, there's a lot of experimentation going on. There's a lot of let's try this, or, like you said, speed versus quality, or whatever the idea might be, for the argument at that point, eliminate the humans altogether. I mean, we're definitely seeing all of that play out. I mean, just flip through any article right now and you can find good and bad horror stories. But if you dig far enough through that data, you'll probably find some of those decision points that got them there.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm fascinated about.
yeah, I would say two things. One, every agent needs a human to manage it. So the work has certainly changed, but humans not going away. And we're seeing a record number of job postings. And I've been in that camp. I haven't been in the camp of sort of job destruction. However, there is another camp that sort of believes that this is a interim step, which then we'll see in a few years, meaning every organization has a very large backlog. And so there's just a ton of work right now to work through. But like, what happens when we get past that backlog? And part of me says, that's the wrong perspective. I think what's going to happen is the ambition of companies is going to get bigger. Instead of chasing trying to become a unicorn, they're trying to become a decacorn, right? And so as ambition gets bigger and bigger, you just need to do more, execute more, build more. So there is still something that's sort of orchestrating and judging and evaluating and determining what's working, and and the work around communication and driving consensus and getting people on board, that's not going to go away, right? And so a lot of those sort of attributes are still going to be there. um, that said, it's crazy times, and I do often use a rubric when I think about use of AI and thinking about what I'm working on. And I use this in the context of just code generation, but honestly, it applies to design and other functions as well. And uh, i- it's very simple. It's like, is this a new product or is this an existing product, right? That completely changes the calculus on how you should approach something. Do I care if it needs to be human maintainable or readable, right? So you could say, you know what, I'm going to completely delegate code generation and not care if I can read it anymore or not, versus I want it to still be readable. Like, what happens in a situation where we need human reviewers or whatever, right? um, is this an internal tool or a public facing tool, right? With just the volume of things being built and published, there's all kinds of security vectors that were never exposed before, and AI is not particularly creating the most secure software, right? So these SRE teams are working like crazy, right? So I mean, those are just examples of questions that sort of come up as I think about a rubric. I think there's more. I have a whole list I've talked about elsewhere, but I think uh, uh, as you can probably tell as I'm talking, it's like I don't even know the answer, like, because it's all moving so fast. I'm in the middle of it myself.
Yeah, and I think that's the most honest, and that's what I say. Like in other spots where I've been, and I've been asked that, and I'm like, look, I can tell you what my opinion is, and if somebody is, definitive about what that answer is, I mean, I wouldn't believe that because I don't know that we all know that right now, and we're just trying to, go with the tide, so to speak, and then try some different things. And yeah, cybersecurity. I've had one spot, where I've talked about that and just how, if I think any further, the terrifying thoughts that come into my mind. So I don't want to put that out into the ether, but yeah, it's real. We're using AI to fight AI in some regards to cybersecurity, and wow, I've seen what it couldn't do for me last night when I asked it to do the most simplest thing. So I mean, we're in some interesting times with a lot of this stuff, and yeah, it'll be so fascinating to see where all this goes. But yeah, the product side. I mean, I'm loving that. It makes me excited. Like I've made a couple simple things, that I didn't really have any desire to do before, but I don't know. I just, like you said, a chip off my shoulder made me go, I'm going to sit down and do this one day. And I'm glad I did it. I got a lot of exposure, and the gears are turning to do more now. So I cannot wait to see all the things that are out there. Is it going to be maintained? Is it going to be, well, this is clearly first wave AI in 10 years. Like we can tell just by looking at it to where it's at now. Like probably, I mean, the websites went through that, like you said, with .com, social media went through that with its boom. And I mean, this will be its own thing, but I'm fascinated to watch where it goes.
I mean, what you're describing is a good example, I think, of what AI has enabled. If you look at sort of every like tech step function, it's effectively expanded the TAM. So when you were building in 2000, when I had a startup in that era, like I had to go to a physical building, manage my rack unit, ru- you know, edit Apache settings there physically in person. Like, it was Apache meaning for the web server. It was just all crazy, right? And then we had the cloud emerged with Amazon Web Services, and that became a huge unlock. And then we had React Native, for mobile development, and just like there's been a series of abstractions that have happened over the years. Today you're building so little near the metal. You're using Clerk for authentication. You're using Supabase for your relational database. You're using Firebase for auth, right? Or Firestore for auth, right? So it's like the fact that, or whatever it is, who knows, right? The fact that all of this sort of exists at these sort of layers, AI is just now another unlock. And I like to describe it sometimes as we're effectively unleashing all this like pent up creativity from millions of people who couldn't build before because they didn't have access to those resources or whatnot. And now they can build. And so I think that's all like, I think it's amazing. It's effectively democratized software.
Yeah, it is truly the number one thing for me, at least, that I find so great about this era is just all the tools, all the things so quick, so fast. Like things that would have took, who knows, years maybe even, to get to some of these points where now we're able to do it in a matter of days or weeks, depending on the size of what you're trying to get to. And it's making me think constantly every day that, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, what is something that I could put out there or show or change somebody's life, or I don't know, something that we don't have in the industry that could help somebody. And if I happen to strike it, awesome. But truly just to try to make somebody's day better is where I'm headed to, or make my day better, I guess. Take away more of my manual stuff. So
Well, I think that's what, people are talking about the SaaS apocalypse. There is these real questions, I think, within companies. Like, are you using your SaaS tool as a system of record? Or are you actually using the interface of it? And, there is an argument that the future of work is a bunch of bespoke apps or a terminal window. You're not using the browser as much as you thought you might. You're not using the interfaces of most of these tools. These tools, at some level, are databases and workflow builders. So I think, I don't think there's conclusions around this. Certainly, I've seen across different organizations that I've spoken with different takes. Some people have started ripping out maybe the lowest level of their SaaS products, let's say like WordPress. We've done some of that internally within my teams, and sort of vibe coded a much more contextually aware experience. However, on the other hand, um, you know, we're not day to day maintaining it, and we're not, doing all the security. And so there's advantages to using another vendor. But the fact that that optionality of buy versus build, where build is much cheaper than it was in the past, exists today, I think will create price compression. And so we are seeing in some ways another transformation, which is in how we pay for products. Moving from a licensing model like old school Windows with the serial key to a subscription model to now a usage based pricing model. And so I sort of think that third tier, that third wave or third chapter of business model pricing transformation is sort of being figured out now. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how that impacts various SaaS organizations.
yeah, I mean, you made some very valid points. I mean, even the evolution of how we pay for things, and now we're very much in this usage where people are getting familiar with tokens and what that actually means. And a couple of years ago, I mean, maybe you hear about Bitcoin or something, but I mean, not a lot of people were throwing that around at the lunch table with no tech experience and just understand what that is now. It's such a fascinating and just fast paced, movement that we're talking through here. And with that, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors.
Hello, everyone. Ryan here from Stellarhorn. Let me take a quick second to talk to you about something I see all the time. Most businesses don't actually have a technology problem, they have a leadership problem. They've got systems, tools, even teams in place, but no clear direction, no strategy, and no one connecting technology to the business. That's exactly why I built Stellarhorn Group. I help organizations through fractional CIO leadership, advisory, and project-based work, bringing executive-level technology leadership without the full-time CIO cost. Whether it's strategy, cybersecurity, AI governance, or leading critical initiatives, it's about helping you make better decisions, reduce risk, and actually move forward with confidence. If that sounds like something your organization is dealing with, please reach out. Let's have a conversation. Stellarhorn Group, rare leadership, real results. Technology leadership without the full-time CIO cost.
Now that we're back, one thing that you've talked about repeatedly is disruption becoming the moat. So why is disruption becoming such a massive competitive advantage right now?
I mean, disruption is such an overloaded term. When I think of new products, and again, I think it depends what context when we think about the word disruption. But when I think about new products, often the strategy is defined an insertion point. And I often define an insertion point as, it's like an angle of attack. It's like, what is this large company not doing? Or what is this large company built, but they would not make it a top 10 priority? And can we exploit it? And those exploits could be a feature, it could be a geography, it could be a type of user, it could be a business model. It could be, you think about Netflix to Blockbuster. It's like, we're doing the same thing, but we have a different business model, right? And that was disruptive, right? So there's many angles of attack. And I think that's what gives startups a chance, because sort of the game or the arc that I often see is you build into this sort of into this disruption or into this unique insertion point. You're mostly unnoticed for a couple of years because either they're aware but they just don't care because it's just not big enough or it's too small, and then you hit this point where you're now 1-2% of the market on this like one axis, right? Because in 2026 it's not like big tech isn't doing everything, so there's almost nothing that's green space. Everything's red ocean. And then what happens is somebody internally goes, whoa, this is turning into something, we should put more energy here, effort here, we should build this out. And often when that happens, it's actually a force multiplier, because what happens is they then go and educate the whole market that this is important. Like, we need a canvassing product or a whiteboarding product or whatever. This is important. And all of a sudden now that education, it will boost your business because people are aware and they start buying because in some ways you're the heterogeneous option. You're not locked into some single platform, right? Then of course there's like a window of opportunity after which at some point you're saying, okay, can I exist on my own? Because big tech strategy is always very simple. It's like, we're going to give it away for free and commoditize you and include it in like such a low price bundle because they have such pricing flex that it becomes very hard as a startup. And from a CIO perspective, I love. I'm not a CIO, but they love paying for less things, right? And both not only from sort of a money perspective, but just sort of from a security, blast radius sort of perspective, right? Things to manage, things to maintain, whatever. So I mean, that's kind of one axis when I think about disruption with like new product development. I think when you're thinking about cultural disruption, it's one thing to come in and say, hey, we're gonna disrupt the flow of work, change how we work, adapt AI, disrupt. But it's a whole nother thing to actually do that in practice. You're creating anxiety on the teams. An unfocused team not swimming together is going to way underperform, right? So it is a process, and that's why the CEO job is not an envious job in a big company, because you have to spend that time swimming together, getting people on board, socializing, trying to create that consensus. The quote I like to think about, I think it was an old Barack Obama quote, that something like when you're a small company or whatever, it's like turning a motorboat. You can do that right away. But when you're U.S. government, it's like turning, an aircraft carrier. It takes like many days to make a right turn, right? And so that's very, very true when you think about companies and their size. The number of people involved absolutely slows decision making.
Yeah, I mean that quote hits home. Like, I probably had that startup, mentality in me of going like, it's obvious, it's right here, but then, yeah, I'm spending so much time politicizing and negotiating and trying to convince, and maybe then I got to do a few things I didn't think I would have to do in order to get the buy-in vote from the other person, and yeah, I definitely, that hits home so much. And whether it's right or wrong, I mean, I get it, bigger versus smaller. They're bigger for a reason at that point versus smaller. You're trying to make the impacts to get to potentially that big at that point. So yeah, it's such a fascinating time stuff. um, so, do you think that the traditional like product mode is like a weakening, or do you think it's just changing and evolving at this point?
So I think product moats have always been, when I think of the term moat and I think of product, I'm mostly thinking about switching cost and switching cost versus sort of like insertion point. And when I think of switching cost, it often distills to a few things. It's sort of social graph, right? So it's too hard to switch because your whole network is there. Data's locked in some form of capacity. It's too hard to switch because you can't export. Custom workflows, a lot of custom development has happened. Brand, all the cool kids are using that. So brand identity, um, you know, um, sort of cold start onboarding. You had to go through a lot of energy up front. You don't want to go through it again, right? It could be a payment. It's on an annual, multi-year licensing, whatever. You don't want to switch, right? All of these things kind of play into various sort of strategies around protecting retention or paid retention of a product. Um, has this changed in an AI first world? I mean, I think you look at like traditional SaaS, like Salesforce as an example, let's say the, capital of SaaS, capital S SaaS, right? Um, they a large part of their moat was all of the customization. You deployed a Salesforce instance, you would ultimately have to hire there's a whole nother ecosystem of firms that would just effectively customize your workflows, make it personalized, make it the way it works for your company, organization, whatnot. And it was a non-trivial amount of engineering work and cost. That entire aspect of it has greatly shifted to AI. And it's now being done at a fraction of the cost with just token spend. And it makes total sense. It's internal tooling. It's not public facing. The judgment is a lot more straightforward. It's like, this is the workflow. This is what I need to build. It's really just customization. And so it's fascinating. So now does that impact Salesforce's moat? As you have to decide between two different CRMs or not? Probably, right? And so I think again, I think it depends like what flavor of the word moat and what you mean by that, because I think there's it's an overloaded term. But my interpretation is AI is as I said earlier, certainly changing the calculus around buy versus build.
I think that you hit on something that I'm going to follow up here within a second, but the brand part of it, and with all the changes that are happening right now, how important do you think that a personal brand is becoming to, say, a founder or a builder at this point versus kind of where we're moving? Like, does it even matter at this point?
It's both exciting and sad that there was a company recently, and I'm not calling them out because they're obviously innovating in exceptional ways, but literally called Pulsa, which is like AI slop backwards, right? And they raised a bunch of money, right? And so on one hand, as execution becomes cheap, the volume of slop that's being released at multiple levels is just going crazy. But is this slop getting any reach? That's really the question. And I think for a long while, the brand has shifted from the company to the individual. I mean, that's been the case over the past decade too. I think the question now is growth and distribution. I mean, that's really the hard part, right? If the building and execution is sort of easier part, how do you get growth or how do you get acquisition? How do you get distribution? And so as I think about that, I think the only things that are going to matter in the end is reputation. Somebody word of mouth referred this product that you trust. I think all the traditional growth channels, whether it's email, AI SDR, programmatic content through your blog, social, they're there. And I think you have to play those games just for table stakes because that's what other people are playing too, for better or for worse. But I don't think they're creating the step functions anymore. I think in some ways we have to go back to product-led growth. Like, does this product hit a core vice such that I'm willing to tell or share with other people? Does this product have virality baked into a core workflow that's necessary to make it work great? Is this something I want to talk about, right? And so I think that combination of things is more important than ever. And actually, in fact, I actually think it's really neat to be somebody who's been focused on consumer most of their career, like myself, where it's mostly about psychology in this era, because consumer and growth is like the hardest game. And if you understand that psychology, when you come to enterprise and B2B, it's like beginner mode.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's the marketing side of why this button, why this color, why whatever it is that's going to resonate and get somebody to take a look, want to buy, do those things. I've always thought it's fascinating, to the point where I almost went down and got a psychology degree, and then just realized, no, I don't need to go that far. But I do find it fascinating to figure out why humans do the things that they do, and how to engrave that inside of a product, how to get this reach out there. And it is interesting watching humans now try to decipher like photos, like if this photo is real or not real, or and like their stigmatism with AI at this point it's really going to be an interesting time, especially with everything else that you just said. It's just I just keep going back to that. It's just going to be interesting. So to make sure that we can not take up all of your time, because I could sit here and I could continue to talk, what would be an underrated founder skill that you would say would really resonate in today's time?
Creativity. I think most founders are creative at some level because they're operating from an underdog position. I do think there's a lot of drive-by founders. It's sort of like a checkbox, a resume builder, whatever they want to call it. That's fine, but it's and it's nothing to ding them. I think it's one of those things where they kind of enter this, try it, and realize, you know what, I don't actually enjoy this. It's not fun being in a situation where you email people and they don't reply because you don't have a brand, or people don't give you meetings, or it's a lot more convenient, obviously, in a larger company behind you. But uh, I think in this era, I think creativity is absolutely critical because AI is going to give you what you want to hear, and AI is going to give a high quality answer to everybody. And you have to distill amongst all of that what we should actually do. Where should we go? What's worth working on? That judgment, that taste, whatever you want to call it, that creativity. And I think for a lot of people, particularly early founders, there's a tendency to um, do what the other people are doing, right? And I don't think that's usually winning. In my experience, that's often not the winning solution. The winning solution is going to be an original idea or something you've come up or thought of yourself. And it is a little bit scary because a lot of AI is supposed to be a thought partner, but for many, it's shifted to becoming a complete thought delegation, right? And so I think that's a whole nother topic. But I think, these are things I'm thinking about. But yes, coming back to your original question, I would say creativity.
I absolutely love that, because I found myself arguing some of those points of trying to, I mean, use AI appropriately again. There is a way that you can use AI to enhance and help yourself, and there's a way of completely just relying on it. And yeah, every idea I've ever put into it, if I didn't like try to like reel it in, it was like, yeah, you're amazing. You can be anything you want. It's just not the truth. I know myself. I know what I'm not good at, and AI is never going to get me to some of those pieces. um, but with that, what would you say, separates the actual builders from the dreamers?
One thing you can't do with all of this sort of digital transformation and way of work is you can't be stubborn about your workflow, and it's super hard. You've been on a sales team, you've always hit your quota. This was the workflow that worked for you, and suddenly maybe it's working for you, but not as well as it used to in the past because everybody else is now moving just a lot faster. And so I think I'm forgetting your original. Oh yeah, the builders versus the dreamers. I think getting comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable will pay dividends, and a lot of times the problem is not um, recognizing that, hey, maybe I should go try this. It's not knowing how to start. And I think that's for a different conversation. But I often tell people at this point, the models have gotten so good, you don't need to have multiple tools. Just choose anything. I don't care. Go ChatGPT is your thing. Use that. And just ask, and it will tell you what to do. And that's what's so amazing. is the hard part then becomes, I didn't even know I could ask that. But yes, you can ask it. You can say, hey, I'm tired of picking up my kid from school every day. How do I fix it? It'll tell you how to fix it, or how to build software to make it easier, or whatever, right? Or like real life problems, right? So I think that sort of friction to start um, is sort of the unlock, and then once they get started, it pulls you in. I mean, these products have so many addictive aspects that are built into the experience that I don't think people realize and does not get talked about enough. But these products have Farmville style mechanics, which keeps you there, right? Happy curves on the DAU, smile curves, basically. I mean, you don't see that in most consumer products. So I think uh, what that's a different topic, whether that's good or bad. But I think that's the sort of how I would segment the dreamers versus the builders.
I actually love that, especially the piece around just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I do think a lot of stories that you read, at any time point, that some of the biggest breakthroughs were when they decided to dive into being uncomfortable and figuring it out and it, getting creative. All those things that you kind of intertwined throughout our conversation together, like they all kind of hit at that point. And I find myself like if I'm forced to be uncomfortable and have to sort it out, I start using a lot of brain power that maybe I was on autopilot in some other cases. And I realized, wow, I have it beat well. And here we are. And this is why now I become different. So I actually love that. So very last question. What was your biggest lesson that you experienced throughout your startup?
I would say, looking back, probably not taking enough risk. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but there were different points where there were decisions. The hardest startups are where you're kind of like in the middle. It's like the 10% that are crushing it, the 2%, whatever, they know they're crushing it. Doesn't matter what they do, they're going to crush it. And you're lucky. If you land in one of those companies, just hang on for the ride. There's a bottom 10, 20%, they're totally failing. But most companies are somewhere in the middle. Some usage, some adoption, but not. And that's hard, right? And that's where you have to make hard decisions. And those aren't always easy. And so whether it's risk around product, whether it's risk around go to market, I think about, I always ask myself the question like, hey, if we're not getting a step function, we need to take more risk.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. Yeah. Otherwise, if you're just stuck in the middle of the sandwich, so to speak, I mean, you'd rather, I mean, at least I would think, that's my personal opinion, I guess. I'd rather know if the risk that I had in my mind was going to be the one that paid off or could have been, right? I don't want to be the could have been. I want to be the, well, at least I took a shot and we tried and we worked off the data we had. And I mean, that's again how I think I learned the best is through all of those points. So otherwise, yeah, you're just kind of floundering until they gobble, the big 2%ers gobble everything up in your space and acquire you probably one day, and away you go to maybe form the next idea or whatever it is that you're going to do in life. So I actually appreciate that response. It's a good response, at least from my perspective. So, Raj, this has been an amazing conversation, at least from my perspective. And I think that a lot of people that are trying to figure out AI, especially in, product development, growth and leadership, team structure, even just their personal career growth at this point, can definitely take away a lot of things that you have said today. And I appreciate you bringing your perspective, your life experiences and everything that's happening today here to the show. So, if anybody wants to, reach out and connect with you or you have anything going on, where can they do that?
Yeah. I'm Mobile Raj on Twitter and Threads. So you can find me there. LinkedIn, obviously easy. Feel free to DM me. And then I have to shout out some of the cool things we're building at Mozilla. So obviously Firefox, but we're doing a lot of stuff for small business. So we have Solo, it's an AI website builder, and we have some other products in that bucket. So do check it out. And yeah, generally available. Feel free to ping, and happy to chat further offline.
Absolutely love it. And I'll be sure to put all of that into the releases when they go live. So make sure to check those things out, everybody. And with that, our meeting has been adjourned. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here today, Raj. It's been an absolute pleasure. And by all means, stay connected. I'd love to hear more about what's happening with Mozilla and yourselves as well. So with that, take care, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Bye.
Take care.